Hello, this is Robert Messina, and it's impressed upon me to talk about how there's really no difference in this world between male nor female according to the way God, our Father, looks upon us as. I think He's looking upon us without a gender. And I'm going to talk about that in this video, and we're going to know a lot more about it. I hope representing the truth about this whole topic, which I believe I am, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. Now, the key verse is in Galatians 3:28, and I'm going to read the King James Version. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ. Okay? Now, in 1 Peter, for example, that's 1 Peter 3:7. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers not be hindered. And so for the males, that you got to remember that your wife is the weaker vessel. Okay? So one of the things that is different is husbands, love your wife. The commands to the husbands, love your wife. The commands to the wife is to submit yourselves unto the husband. So if she's going to be the weaker vessel, and that's the way it's written, I'm sorry, ladies, it's the way it's written, she's the weaker vessel, and the man is the stronger vessel, and both of us are weak according to the bridegroom. The bridegroom is the strongest vessel, and he's our Lord, and on top of him is the Father. Okay, so we have that too. Okay, so that's the way it is. I didn't say it, I'm reading the scriptures here. This same verse, Galatians 3:28, addresses the Jew and the Greek. Now, the Greek represents the heathen, and the Jew represents the circumcised. And there's no difference. In Christ, there's no difference. There's no difference. Nobody has anything over the other, but there are things expected from the Jew that is not expected from the Gentile. Paul was a Jew, or from the house of Benjamin, that advocated there's no difference between circumcised in the flesh and not circumcised, because there was no difference between Jew and Greek. He advocated don't even circumcise. And the Jew was expected to circumcise. So that was a kind of a problem, and he tried to straighten it out just to let him know what is important. And the importance, no matter how you looked at it, no matter how much you read, the importance is always going to be to love your Father with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And your neighbor, which is very similar to that, as yourself. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And love of the brethren, and love of your neighbor, and love, forgive your enemies, turn your cheek, all of those things that he taught were in the avenue of love. And he has made us in his image, and his image is everything that he talked about. He told us to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And that had to do with all of these. If you wanted to separate it into little lawful verses, lawful words, they would be the same two verses I told you about as far as the laws of love, upon which all of the other commandments hang upon those verses, those laws. He's trying to make us into his image. He said, back in Genesis, he said, let us make man in our image. All right? And man is being molded right now in this world, both the Jew and the Greek, the free and the bond. And the bond is the slave. There are different things expected from the free, the masters, to be kind to the servants, and there are different things that the servants have to do to obey their masters. There's two different roles that, depending on how you were born. However you are born, you got to just play that role. If you were born a man, you got to play that role. If you were born a woman, you got to play that role. There is a difference in this world, but in the next world, that's the whole point. The next world, there is no difference. And the bride of Christ is made up of both male, female, Jew, Greek, and bond and free. It's made up of whosoever believes on him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And they are going to be the ones that live in the 1,000-year reign in the first resurrection. If you're in the first resurrection, and everybody that is born again is, and everybody that's in the book of life is in the first resurrection. And they have a certain place for them when we get there. It's another topic, but depending on what tribe you're in, where you're going to live, if that's where you're going to live, depending, and there's different. Well, I'm going to make another video after this that talks about the Millennium according to Ezekiel. All right, that's going to come up. Okay, so let's go back to it's not good for a man to be alone. He's lonely. He needs a helpmate. What I'm going to try to attach to this is the fact that he not only wanted the man not to be alone, he didn't want his son to be alone. Because there he is, and he's alone. He doesn't have a bride. The son doesn't have a bride yet when he said that. He's talking about making a big creation moment to make the bride. In order for him to have that big creation moment, he has to start with the first day, light. The second day, creating a firmament. The third day, bringing the land together and the seas and everything together and growing the grass and the trees. On the fourth day, he has to make the sun. And the whole thing about his creation week, everything, the purpose of all of it, all of the stars, everything that he did, the purpose of it, all of it, was to create a man, and the man and the woman, male and female made he them, and they collectively are going to be the bride of the Lamb that was slain. Okay? You have a bride of the Lamb, you have a bridegroom, you have a marriage, you have all of these the two shall become one flesh, all of them. The whole analogy about being married on this earth for the things we can understand, the things that are parables in a way, that whole thing has to do with the purpose of the creation of this world that is temporary and is going away. And as beautiful as this world is, it's temporary. And it's going to pass away. We're going to have a new heaven and a new earth. And I think before the new heaven and the new earth, we're still going to be here in the millennium, in the 1,000-year reign, which is the last glorious thing about this world. And eye has not seen nor ear heard what was good things to them that love God in that world, in the millennium time. Because what happens after the millennium? Satan gets loosed. We have Gog and Magog returning to, it started, it stopped, and now it's returning again. We don't have a warrior group from the beast. We don't have a warrior group from the false prophets, but we still have a warrior group from Satan himself on the last hurrah. I call it the last hurrah, the battle of Gog and Magog. Like I said, it's the last hurrah. They're going to lose. I mean, I don't know what makes them think they can beat God. I don't know what kind of. Don't forget, his brain is only as good as the serpent's brain. It has a lot of wickedness and it's wily. He's wild. He's deceptive. He's sneaky. He's subtle. He has all of these traits, but if you wanted to add it all up, the fact that he thinks he's going to beat God, he's got a brain of a lizard. It's the best way to say it. He's got the brain of a lizard. Okay, let's go to the book of Zechariah, chapter 12. We're starting with verse 8. And in that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David. So right there, he's giving you a hint that the weak shall be strong. All right? That's the weak shall be strong. The feeble as David. And don't forget, David as a young youth, probably a teenager, defeated the giant that all of Israel was afraid of. They trembled, and there was nobody, no warrior in Israel that was confident enough to go in front of him and be the champion of Israel. Nobody. David had one thing that went for him, one important thing that went for him. He knew that God was a lot stronger than this uncircumcised Philistine. He knew that, and that was his sword. And he had a helmet of salvation, and in the sense that no matter what happens to him, God is going to be on his side. He had those two things, and he went into the battle with them, and that is what makes David so pronounced as a warrior of God. And we should imitate David. We should not look down upon him just because he had a weakness with Bathsheba. I mean, anyway, let's go on here. Okay. And he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them. So, we're talking about multiplying our strengths right now. And this to me is the beginning of what comes to pass after the seventh trumpet and the resurrection happens. He that comes to pass in that day I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. So the nations that come against Jerusalem, sorry, you picked the wrong nation. You picked the apple of his eye to come against. You are wrong to do that. And believe me, there's lots of nations that step up. And United States is one of them. Verse 10, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications, and they that shall look upon me whom they have pierced. So the ones that have pierced him have been resurrected and can see that they pierced him. Maybe they're not the Pharisees that called him to death. I don't know if they're going to be resurrected in the first resurrection. I believe this is the first resurrection. But it doesn't matter. There were people in the crowd saying, crucify him. His blood be upon us. And those kind of things. His blood be upon us. I want his blood to be upon me. So they were saying something that was, they didn't even realize what they were saying, I think, when they said that. And they shall look upon whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him as one that mourneth for his only son. And shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Okay, so they are looking at him. I mean, this is the house of David. Yehoshua came from the house of David, and he's more recognizable to those in the audience, because those in the audience have seen him. They've seen him being pierced. They look upon whom they pierced. So they look that in the people that are there, you have people that were there at the time he was crucified. That's the reason why I can safely say it's the resurrection. And in the resurrection, all the generations of Israel, all of the tribes of Israel, all of the believers that believe in, all the whosoevers that believe in him are going to be there in that resurrection. And that's a nice thing, because I'm telling you, I'm saying that's a nice thing because I'm expecting to be there. It hasn't happened yet, but when it does happen, I'm expecting to be there. And it's the first resurrection, and blessed are they that are included in the first resurrection. So anyway, meantime, they're looking upon him. Oh, and they're mourning. They're sorry. They see his piercings. They know who he is. They know who he is. They see the piercings, and they pierced him. So that's why they know who he is. Maybe there are a lot of people in the crowd that don't know, but they know. The ones that pierced him know. The ones that cried out, give us Barabbas. They were the ones that knew who he was. And they were mourning. They were crying. And it was as if they killed their own son. Their one firstborn son. 11, in that day shall there be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadadrimmon in the valley of Armageddon. And the land shall mourn every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. So you see here You have a lineage of the house of David. And he begins with the house of David here. In the verse right after this, he begins with the house of Levi, who is born at the time Judah was born. But this lineage, the house of David, begins at David. The thing that I do see, and the land shall mourn every family apart. Now notice every family is apart. The family of the house of David is apart, and their wives are apart. Now I want to mention that part. Their wives are apart. The family of the house of David has a lineage, in particular the lineage of the kings that ends up in Joseph. Those are in particular the ones that are significant, most significant in the family of the house of David. Because David had many wives and he had many sons and daughters. And one of his sons was named Nathan. And their wives, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. Now, when it says the house of David and their wives apart, it was telling me, I look at that as the lineage of the wives are different than the lineage of their husbands. In the next world, you can't say that they were attached because it says their wives apart. The last name of the man is from his father, and you have the last name of the woman from her father. And then when the woman marries the man, they both take the same name as the man's father. The wives have a different lineage, and the lineage of them, whatever their father was, which is going to be totally different than the lineage of the husbands. So they are apart. Okay? So now let's take a look at Zechariah 12, and keep reading here. And the one after the family of David is the family of the house of Nathan, and their wives apart again. Okay? Now, Nathan is a part of the house of David. He's one of his sons. But it's specifically put in here to give another important figure the lineage of Mary, because Mary came from the lineage of Nathan. And she's going to be in Nathan's lineage. She's going to appear as everybody else. There's no male nor female. People are going to know who she is. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Now, then the next thing that you see is the family of the house of Levi. Now, why is he brought into the picture and their wives apart? There were 12 sons of Jacob. Why is he mentioning Levi? And I think the reason he's mentioning Levi is because he wants to point out John the Baptist. And he does it in the family of Shimei apart, and their wives apart. Again, their wives apart. So it's the lineage, it's the male lineage that is always the lineage. Whether you're a male or a female, you get your father's lineage. Okay? So I looked up who this Shimei is, and there were many of them there, but I think the one that makes sense as to why it's listed here is because Shimei was a grandson of Levi. Okay, and then I also looked what was important about Shimei, and the thing I found was Asaph, who he wrote a couple of psalms. He was a Levite, and he was a singer, and I think you know, John the Baptist's father, remember, he was, he had to report to do temple business, and that was when the angel came to him. That's the reason why I think Shemai, the lineage of Shemai, is mentioned here. Now, I looked up the name Shemai, and names all have Hebrew words that sort of like match their name. And I looked it up in Strong's for Shemai. With the word that matches his name means fame. It's used 5 times for fame. Now, see, now what I'm getting at, this is almost this is a good description of John the Baptist. Mentioned 5 times is fame. Mentioned 5 times is report. Mentioned 3 times is hear. Mentioned 2 times is tiding. Mentioned 1 time is bruit. Mentioned 1 time is loud. Mentioned 1 time is speech. So all of those meanings built into Shemai's name very much describes John the Baptist, and that's what I see. So that sort of like helps helps confirm what I'm saying is true. I mean, it's a guess. I don't know, but I'm guessing. I'm allowed to guess when it makes sense. I don't when if it didn't make sense, I wouldn't even mention it. Okay, so and Matthew 11:11, verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there has not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And it might be said like that because John the Baptist died before the atonement. So I think there's he's going to be judged. Every knee has to bow before the Lord in order to be saved. So the people that they haven't received him as their Lord, like after the resurrection of Jesus, after the resurrection of Jesus is very, very different, especially after the resurrection and the baptism of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. Okay? So now let's go over to another confirmation that there's neither male nor female. Let's see. Before I want to go to Acts 23:8. And that's the statement that says the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit. But the Pharisees confess both. Now I clarified what the Sadducees stood for. Let's go to Luke 20:27-39, when the Sadducees thought they had an example, and this might have been an example that actually was true. Okay? They may have known about this example, and they must have said to themselves, you see, so whose wife was she going to be? Because let me read it. Then came to him certain of the Sadducees, which deny that there is any resurrection. And they asked him, saying, Master, Moses wrote unto us, if any man's brother died, having a wife, and he die without children, that his brother should take his wife and raise up seed for his brother. There were therefore 7 brothers. The first took a wife, died without children. The second took a wife, died without children. The third took her, and in like manner the 7 also. And they all left no children and died. And last of all, the woman died. So they have this great question to trap him. They're going to figure out, how is he going to get out of this? How is he going to say there's a resurrection if, according to the laws, there's no place to put this wife of 7 brothers? So Jesus answers and says to them, the children of this world marry and are given in marriage. But they which shall be counted worthy to obtain that world and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. All right, so right there he's saying there is no marriage. So if there's no marriage, there's no children either. Okay. Neither can they die anymore, for they are equal to angels and are children of God, being the children of the resurrection. Neither can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angels. They're equal to angels. Angels can't have children either. I don't think angels have genitals. They can appear as a woman, and the same angel can appear as a man. That's how I see it. He is spirit in the heavens. An angel is spirit. Our souls are spirit. There are many souls in heaven right now. They're called cherubim. Has a different Hebrew word than angel. But both of them are spirit. God is spirit. The only flesh in heaven right now, flesh and bone, is the Son of Man, Jesus. He's the only flesh and bone that's up there. Well, because when you go up there, you get judged. When your soul goes up there, it gets judged. And Nathan had a lot to say about that. So anyway, let's go back to reading that last piece that Jesus talks about. He says, now that the dead are raised, even Moses showed at the bush. When he says Moses showed at the bush, that was the burning bush when God called him. At that point, he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Because he is not the God of the dead, but of the living. For all live unto him. And then certain of the scribes answered and said, Master, thou hast well said. They might have been Pharisees, those guys. Now, Moses lived when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had already passed. All right? So, but he's saying here, when a man dies, his soul does not die until it gets judged if he's thrown into the lake of fire. As far as I can see, that's the end of him. I don't think he's tortured forever and ever and ever. That's my opinion. Okay, it's just my opinion. But if he's written in the book of life, as the next verse says, for he is not a God of the dead, but of the living, for all live unto him. That's being written in the book of life. That's being part of the resurrection. That's being neither male nor female. That's being part of the bride of Christ. And I just want to talk about the creation of Adam and Eve as it is an analogy of our Father creating a bride for his son. He said it wasn't good for him to be alone for the man, because he knew that his son would be happy with a joyous wife that he's creating. And that is going to be the bride of Christ. You can't say that she doesn't exist. She's not in Scripture. If she's in Scripture, believe me, the Bible is never going to say anything that isn't true. She is there. She's amongst us now. A lot of us that are hearing this message right now are part of her. It's a conglomerate. It's made up of many, many souls. It's made up of souls, really. Okay, and that's the bride of Christ, and she's the last piece of the joy. We have the millennium, the 1,000 years before the New Jerusalem. New Jerusalem coming from heaven is the last thing. Okay, that's the last joy that happens. I mean, it's never described what goes on in there. Everything else is described, including things about the millennium. And that's the only thing we can go by right now. The millennium is going to be a joyous time, and we have that engagement with 1,000 years that we live with, enjoy with Jesus. Anyway, back to the analogy. Okay, so in other words, when he says, "Let us make man in our image," he's got in mind making man in his image and making them both male and female to be as a bride for his son. Okay? Now, what happened first before he made the woman? He first Adam was lonesome. Okay? He was lonesome. And he he was happy with all the animals. He named all the animals, but there was nothing that took away that lonesomeness. Then he put a deep sleep on Adam, put him a deep sleep. Now I think that Jesus' deep sleep was from the time that uh, God prophesied that there was going to be enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, or war, or fighting, and the end result of that enmity was going to be the picture of his heel on the serpent's head. Okay, there was going to be somebody that was going to come and put his heel on the serpent's head. So he went from the sin of Adam to the cross, and after the cross, he submitted himself to the battle on the cross, and the result of the battle was a victory and on the third day when he came out that Sunday morning. That was the time that he is crushing the head of the serpent. Now, remember, when he created the woman, and after he put him to sleep, he took a bone out of the rib of the man, of Adam. Took a bone out of his rib, and he created the woman. He had all of the DNA and everything he needed, and instructions said to create a woman that would be bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. Okay, so and it came out of his side. So, and remember, what came out of his side was blood. What happened with the blood? As I've said many times, there was an earthquake, and the blood didn't go in dirt and just forget about it. There was an earthquake, and there was a crack created for the blood to go down, and the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, was down right below it, about 20 feet below it. And even though it was 2,000 years old, they found out, and this was Ron Wyatt for finding this, the blood was taken to an Israeli lab. They analyzed it, and they even want to do it, but they did it, and there it was, boom, a miracle that even get information from that blood that was so old and dead. Anyway, so that blood was the atonement that came out of the side of the man, the Son of Man. Okay, do you see how there's an analogy in the creation of the woman, and there's an analogy of the creation of the bride of Christ? All right, this is the analogy. Okay, now there are two joyful events after the sound of the last trump and our groom returns. And one of them is former females, former slaves, former uncircumcised, are just like everybody's the same. There's no difference. And that's when that Galatians verse comes to pass. It's correct as I'm speaking right now. It holds its weight as I'm speaking. But when we all are the same collectively as the bride of Christ, that's when it really shows itself to be true. We should never be envious of anybody else. We should never be sorry of the position in life that our Father made us, because He has a purpose, a certain purpose that He wants from all of us. He knows what He's doing. How He made you, He knows what He's doing. And He made you in love where He wants you to succeed. So you're probably in a situation, and we all are, where we're able to succeed because that's how He made us. So it's going to be worth any suffering you have here. For the 1,000 years are going to be joyous, and then after that it's even going to be more joyous. And that's when Abraham and his seed, and we all are, the saved are all his seed. They're all in the book of life, seed of Abraham. And they are just like their father Abraham, looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. And that is the New Jerusalem that comes. And nobody talks about what happens there because nobody knows. Nobody knows. Okay, let's go to Revelation 19. And this is again in the theme of the bride of Christ marrying the Lamb. Okay. 19 verse 7, let us be glad and rejoice, give honor to Him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and His wife has made herself ready. I see this taking place after the sound of the last trumpet, when Jesus comes back, and there's a resurrection, and there's a number of days that coincides with this in Daniel. That gives the number of days, which is 2,300 days, which is from the beginning of the first seal, which begins the last 7 years. You go through 2,300 days, and you come to what I have calculated as to be the sound of the beginning of the sound of the last trumpet, or the end of the sound of the last trumpet. That Daniel verse talks about how the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, if the sanctuary shall be cleansed, that's telling me that coincides with, and His wife has made herself ready. Okay, now let's the next verse. 8, and to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white. Now, what is this fine linen? For the fine linen is the righteousness of saints. So, isn't it the choice of brides, the color to be arrayed is white? And I think this is where it comes from. I want one more little thing that I want to talk about with this verse 4. Revelation 14, verse 4. talking about the 144,000 now, which were redeemed from the earth. Verse above that says this. These are they which were not defiled with women. So that tells me not defiled with women, they're men. But the reason they're not defiled with women is for they are virgins. To me, a virgin is a woman. So they're virgins. They're women. And the explanation that I want to point out is the only thing that makes sense with those two conflicting thoughts. They are men or women, because the women women could be included in the 144,000. There's no reason that they couldn't. I mean, a woman that walked with God, she's not allowed because she's a woman. That doesn't make sense. So the 144,000 are from the tribe, and again, the woman gets her lineage from the tribe, the men of the tribe. That confirms that thought. And on top of that, it confirms the thought of men, the men that are not defiled with women in this thought. They're not defiled with women, and yet they're virgins, which means they are part of the bride of the Lamb. That does exist, and there is certainly Yehoshua HaMashiach that is the bridegroom of that bride. Okay, so those are my thoughts, my dear people. And again, shalom.